It's horror week. Welcome back to the West Coast Avengers. Today's interview is with two legends. We're just going to go right into it. I'm talking to Kelley Jones and Matt Wagner about Dracula 2, The Brides. The Kickstarter is ongoing right now. Welcome. I have my blood. And I have two people that I invited in because you're supposed to invite them in. We have Kelley Jones and Matt Wagner to talk about the second volume of their self-published, creator-owned, well, I guess it's creator-owned. Yeah, Dracula, but part 2, The Brides.
Book 2, The Bride, yes.
Yeah, how are you guys doing today?
We're doing great. Great. We're real happy to be at this point in this project. This started several years ago now, but it was the culmination of literally decades of saying to each other, hey, we got to work together someday. And, when we said that, we meant something significant, not just a one-off together, Yeah. And
when he first asked, I thought it was going to be Batman.
Yeah.
And, I thought,
it kind of was. What it was.
Yeah, he is a bat
man.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kelley, I had posted something on Facebook one day, and Kelley hit me with that same, we really got to work together, blah, 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 blah. And I had been brewing on this Dracula idea for a long, long, long time, because as we well know, Dracula is well-trodden material. And there's been just a million versions in film, on radio, in comics, other novels, just add an item, and so I finally had what I thought was a good take on it. And I said to Kelley, are you serious about this? Because now I think I actually have an idea, but it's going to be a commitment for both of us, of time and effort. And he was in the right spot in his career in life, and I was in the right spot in my career in life. So the planets just aligned, and here we are. So it feels really good to be this deep into it at this point,
Well, it was for me, it was easy. It was to work with Matt and to be totally free.
Yeah.
I think what always makes any kind of creative person do their best work. I think you always do your best work, but when you're free, it becomes great work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're not tethered to really anything with the exception of like
just him. That's my only audience. So,
and you're tethered to like kind of what you guys set for each other, according to you guys, is going outside the lines of what Bram Stoker wrote, like telling the story that was not told in full or not even really told.
While at the same time sticking strictly to what he wrote.
Right.
Really, really trying to take every little detail of what he said, what he wrote, and really
I don't think no one's done this before. It's also
which again is when I finally hit on this idea is like, oh, that's the avenue that has not been trodden on this.
Yeah. Well, so right now you guys have already hit 131,000 with 1,500 plus backers. By the time this airs, I expect it to be 500,000. Let's just say 500,000.
Yay!
I mean, look, I'll say this, and I do want to talk about the first book in a bit, but I want to get into the second book a little bit. I haven't had this much fun reading anything horror in a long time, and I'm on I read it twice, and we've been
hearing that from a lot of people, and boy, that we couldn't have asked for. I mean, that's the absolute golden mean that we had hoped for.
Dave, what I love is when he first told me this, and I first read his script. That's how I felt, and I read it twice, and nothing had been done other than what he sent me. And you always have that fear. Here I get. I print it out and it's like this big, thick script. And I'm like going, oh, please, God, don't make it be something like Matt. Matt is great. But what if Matt screws up? And then I'm stuck on this. And I read it and I was all the way through.
Yeah.
I just said, this is going to be the best year of drawing I will have. This is just wonderful. And, the fact that you're saying what you're saying is exactly how I felt when it was just me and him.
Yeah,
And,
and
you know, in so many ways, we wanted to really recapture what we loved about reading comics at a certain
Mhm.
stage in our life, and specifically horror comics, you know, and we really feel like we captured that, you
Yeah.
know, a sense of the unexpected, and yet a sense of the archetypical and the familiar as well.
Well, Matt said
And
heavy metal. What if we got hired to do heavy metal in
Mm.
1978 and you and I were doing this? And that is all I needed. Then at that point, I found I can do whatever I want.
I
And
mean that.
because when I read it, Matt was doing whatever he wanted. And so I thought,
Yes,
okay,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, and it's something, and I don't know how deep you guys are into, like, not daily, you know, not weekly grind of comics, but like the stuff that's been coming out in the horror genre. It feels like you know, rising tide is raising all the ships. Like, a lot of people are putting out some really good horror stuff. And I wonder, and I know this is steeped in, you know, 150 years ago writing for Bram Stoker, 130 years ago, but I wonder if it's just all the shit that we've experienced in the last 10 years in this
oh, well,
world and
sure,
this country
sure.
is
There's
bringing
a
out the need for it.
there's a he just passed away recently, but there was a horror historian, a fellow named David Scull, who
Mhm.
wrote one of my favorite histories of horror, called The Monster Show. And he wrote a lot of other books. He wrote a lot of books about Dracula. He wrote one about the transition of Dracula from book to stage to screen, through
Mhm.
Nosferatu, through the first stage versions, ultimately to the Lugosi version, the first Lugosi version. But in The Monster Show, he talks about how when popular culture when horror became a thing in popular culture,
Mhm.
and it was at kind of at two different stages. One was the Victorian era, where all of a sudden cities were enormous, and so people were living on top of each other. So there was a sense of the horror and the threat from within. You know,
Yeah.
so you had a lot of ghosts, you had vampires invading from abroad, and you had a certain pestilence that was threatening things. But then his other stage is in the aftermath of World War One, when all of a sudden, for the first time,
Mhm.
medical science was good enough that they could save soldiers on the battlefield,
Yeah.
but most of them were horribly maimed. So these man-made monsters came back to society and were living amongst us. So this fascination with the grotesque and having to face up to the grotesque and having to face up to the realities of violence really instilled this trend in popular culture to address that, because
Yeah.
I always maintained the best horror stories are those that are about something else, you know,
Yes.
are about something deeper than just the scares, you know. One of my favorite ones to point to is Let the Right One In, one of my favorite vampire movies of all time. And that's about loneliness, you know. It's
Mhm.
about the loneliness of being a bullied 12-year-old boy or a solitary 200-plus-year-old vampire, you know.
Yeah.
And it strikes the perfect chord on both of those fronts, connecting those two characters, you know. So yeah, there's always what's happening in society always affects the popular culture of the day. And yeah, if we're getting a lot of horror stories now, it's because we lived through a fairly horrific event in the last
Yes,
several
we
years.
did.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. And it continues.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So with this book too, we're exploring the brides, and I'll admit I don't know much, you know, about the brides. Obviously,
Nobody does. That's the great
yeah,
part.
yeah. Um,
The brides, when you say the brides of Dracula, boom, image comes to mind right away, right? It's because they were in so many of the various film versions.
mhm.
They're only in the book for a handful of pages.
Yeah.
So it
Okay.
just is a testimony to what a powerful dramatic moment that is, and what a kind of indelible, searing narrative it is that has stuck with the legend of Dracula for so long. So
Mhm.
there's 3 of them in the book. There's not much revealed about them other than the fact that one of them seems to be a little more aristocratic or upper class, because the other 2, when they're approaching Jonathan Harker to feed on him because he's wandered out of the safe area of the
Yeah.
castle, one of them says, okay, it's your right to go first, and there's plenty of kisses for all of us.
Mm.
And that's kind of the only thing. So in writing this, I was like, all right, so I have to come up with 3 completely different women. I have to come up with 3 completely different characters. They can't just be the same character. And I have to have 3 different motivations for why Dracula would choose them, you know. And I don't want to make no mistake. Dracula, they're not on the same footing as Dracula.
Right.
He's the imperious bastard that he is throughout all of book 1, and
Mhm.
and he doesn't really consider them his equals. And yet, Dracula, when he was alive, when he was Vlad, had no offspring. So these are the first things he's created. So he does feel some kind of responsibility to them that he never quite expected to feel, other than just something he conquered, which is he's very used to that,
Well, it starts with lust, and then it turns into.
I wouldn't call it love, but
no,
as close as that asshole could feel to love.
There were moments in the first book, like with his servant, but then ultimately he knew he was going to sacrifice him, and same with what's her name,
Nakaisha.
Yeah, like there was a little.
In fact, if you look through the first book, he definitely has a soft spot for the ladies.
Yeah, sure.
He speaks very fondly of his first wife, who just didn't ultimately have the mettle to be the mate of a warlord. He obviously feels very tender towards Nakaisha, and in fact, when his bloodlust forces him to make her his first victim, he's kind of aghast, and he even talks about how I'm used to bloodletting, I'm used to death, and he's still just kind of shocked that this happened. As he says, dead by my hand, dead by my kiss. And even if you go back to the very first scene, he's in the tent with Constantine, his lieutenant.
Yes.
Who chastises the two.
And he defends them.
Right. And he says, no, these women gave me comfort. Make sure they're rewarded, So he does have a soft spot for the ladies. Not to say if you were part of the enemy tribe, he would have you impaled without a second thought.
Yeah, he had no trouble with that.
Well, and to Kelley, if it would be hard to deny any of the ladies that you draw, because you do draw a very curvaceous, beautiful woman. So that there's that.
And here again, Kell had to draw 3 completely different women.
They all had to be different. Luckily, when I read Matt's script, I kind of knew all these women in real life. And so I kind of have been basing it on these women. I asked their permission first because Matt is pretty horrific to them. And they all jumped on it, man. They all jumped on it.
I get to be a bride of Dracula?
Yeah. And while they're saying that, I'm going, well, now, basically he rapes, murders, does all these horrible things.
Right.
They're in. Yes, because it's Dracula.
It's different time. Different time.
So he has a power, even just as a literary comic book figure, as he does in the movies and in the book.
Vampiric seductiveness.
Yeah, they were all in.
So for the new book, it's 30. How many more pages is it?
30 pages longer. The first one was just shy of 30 pages long, 24 pages. The first one was 96, and this one's 120.
Yeah.
So Kelley, how was that experience? Having to do more, because it's you're doing
that's
a lot of the heavy lifting there.
Matt writes great sequences.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't write big long things, and you have to wait for that moment. You get great sequences, and in those sequences, they pay off at the end.
Yeah.
And that sequence then builds to the next sequence. So you don't get bored. You don't get there's nothing like that. It's like, wow, I got this great scene, which leads into the next great scene, which builds to the next great scene. And that's what happened if in the first one, you see that.
Mm-hmm.
Just the old days, we used to call that storytelling.
Yes. At the same time, Matt's one of those rare guys who does a story arc.
Yeah.
All these components make it fascinating to read, and then you have an arc of a character. So it's very exciting to work on it at all times. I've never felt tired, bored, mind wander, or anything. I'm focused on it all the time, whether I'm drawing it or inking it.
Yeah.
And that's so incredibly rare to get.
And on the other side of that equation, I'm constantly writing these scenes thinking to myself, oh, Kelley's really going to kill it on this. This is going to be fucking awesome. And then the art comes back and it's better than I could have.
Yeah.
But it's a great collaboration.
Like, oh my God, he added that and that and that. Like, for instance, here's this little one-off. I was looking at the art from the new one just the other day, and one of the brides, this is a very minor spoiler, but she resists him longer than the others. So when he finally gets her, he's feeding on her, and there's a shot where she's laying there and she's topless. He's torn her dress open and everything, And I just only recently noticed, Cal, she's bleeding from like 5 different spots.
Yes.
As if in his passion, he fed on her here and fed on her here and fed on her here. You know?
Yeah, because you made him wait. He had to work for that one.
Yeah. And it's the passion of, like a love affair for so long and it never happened.
The others two
fucking crazy when it does happen, so
the other two are right there. This one, you made him work for that one. And I thought, he would. That's why we relate to Dracula.
Yeah.
What's the timeline on the second book? As per
so the first
where the
one,
first one
the first one takes place over the course of about a decade because the tenure at the Scholomance, which again is something that Stoker himself mentions twice in the original novel. It still blows my mind. Nobody ever did anything with that, but that's okay. We got to it first. It covers about a decade because the tenure at the Scholomance is 7 years.
Right.
Whereas this one covers centuries.
Okay.
He doesn't get the brides, boom, 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 all in a row real quick. Gets one, gets another one. A little bit later, he gets the third one. And, there might be a fourth one.
Oh.
So this one takes us up to right before the beginning of the novel itself.
Okay.
So we see, when the novel starts, when Harker gets the novel, Dracula's not in too good a shape. He's old, he's withered, he's not at the height of his powers. So we get to see that arc. That's the arc that Kelly's talking about. We get to see how he gets to that point.
Sweet. Well, yeah, because I was wondering, the Scholomance, and that's such an impressive, that entire portion of the book. I mean, I sat and I tried to savor things and I couldn't. Like, I read it and then I took a break and then I read and I'm like, fuck it, I'm finishing this book. I mean, the pace, like you were saying, Kelly, it's perfect the way Matt wrote it.
Well, great movies are that way. Great movies are, Stanley Kubrick says, come up with 6, 7 great sequences and you have a movie. The trick is to stitch it together.
Yeah, to tie it all together.
And I think what Matt did was do that exactly. There's, 10, 12 great these sequences. So that's why you can't stop, and that's why I couldn't stop. It's why it's the same. If you can't stop, it's why I have pure energy for it.
Yeah.
And a real happiness when I get to it because I know Matt's done something I think important beyond just it's entertaining. It's great comics.
It is.
And one of the challenges in writing it, I got to point out, is the fact that, when somebody comes to a Dracula book, they want vampire shit.
Of course.
And since this is his origin, book 1, he doesn't really become a vampire to the end. And so we really had to make sure that he still felt very much like Dracula.
Well, he's dangerous through the whole thing.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if either of you have ever seen Dracula Untold, the Dracula origin movie that Legendary Comics did, starring Luke Evans.
That came out a couple years, maybe like a half a decade ago.
Yeah, he's not very recognizable as Dracula. And another thing that I was determined to do was to have his transformation be something epic.
Yeah.
He couldn't just get bitten by another vampire.
Yeah.
That's boring. It's ordinary. It's how everybody else becomes a vampire. This is fucking Dracula. His transformation
Lord of Vampires.
It has to be unique. It has to be special, So all those went into considerations I had in writing the first book. And of course, Kelly just drew the hell out of it.
So, and Matt, me and you talked about it a little bit on the inspiration for the films, but for the brides, what's your heavy inspiration? Is it the Hammer film, the 1960 film, or is there something besides the book, Bram Stoker?
Well, when you look at the cinematic interpretations of the brides, they're all kind of different. So in the Lugosi version, they're very ghost-like and ethereal. They're all wearing these white, chiffony, clingy, silken gowns.
Yeah.
The second, Christopher Lee never really has a harem of brides in his, but the second Hammer film is called The Brides of Dracula, but does not star Christopher Lee and doesn't have Dracula in it either.
Right.
But there's several vampire women in that one, and they're very feral. They have big fucking mouthfuls of teeth, and they seem to have a very feral hunger, And then let's see, moving forward. So in the Louis Jourdan BBC television, made for television movie, the brides are very cat-like and teasing, they flit around teasing Harker, and then you get to the Coppola version and they're so sexualized,
very.
I mean, there's, they literally form out of the bed to draw Jonathan into them, and at one point, one of them is licking Jonathan's bare nipple, and it's spraying a stream of blood up into her mouth. So I mean, we literally took chunks of all that. All that, all those things go towards inspiration, and yet at the same time, we want to do our version. The only reason for us to do this is none of the other versions ever satisfied us.
No, right. and as Matt said, there's not a lot to look at if you're going to do that. I think my favorite ones is from a odd little film, The Monster Squad. They're only in it.
I love that movie.
But basically, you see Dracula open this closet door when he comes to this little town, and there's 3 like high school girls he's abducted, and they're all shaking. Yeah. But the next time you see them, to Matt's point, they're like major babes at that point. And they're frightening because, like he said, their teeth and they're feral, and they just want blood at that point. You kind of feel sorry for them because, the movie ignores them.
Yeah.
But that briefly, for just a second, I thought, well, that's right on that's frightening. They were frightening in that.
Yeah.
We're talking here about how we portrayed the brides. The brides are a huge part of this second book, but it is still Dracula's story. All of it is Dracula's story. The original novel is what's known as epistolary, which means it's told in the form of letters and journals. There's no third person narrator.
Right.
But the only voice missing from the original novel is Dracula. So we made Dracula the narrator of his own story this time.
Well, so he has to deal with 3 women for now. He's immortal.
Centuries.
3 women.
What's eternity?
And he's stuck. So, but Matt does write how he courts them and then life with them. And that's fascinating. At the same time, decades are passing.
Yeah.
And
blink of an eye,
Yeah, it and you do. There's a not like Matt's doing it. Like it's just you look at it. There's a horror and a humor to this at the same time. Not that Dracula thinks that. He's trying to figure out how to deal with this curse.
Yeah.
And now he's created these women to be vampires, and he's got to live with that. As he grows in stature and diminishes in impact in the world.
Yeah, because he also, he had a goal going to the Scholomance, which was to attain power.
Yeah.
To defeat his enemies, And as the centuries roll on, well, his enemies aren't the same enemies anymore, and they're gone.
Yeah, they're all dead.
And as a vampire, he doesn't really have the sway over the course of human politics as he did when he was a warlord. So he's having to come to grips with that too. And that's a completely different state of being for him.
Kelley, were there some sequences that Matt wrote that you were just like so excited to just dive into, like gore wise, or like this, these
we got lots of that. I keep saying this one's bigger, badder, and bloodier.
It is because each scene demanded that. And Matt had said to me that, look, we didn't get any vampire action in the first one the way people think.
Sure.
But I'm gonna do this with him to make him fascinating. So that it wasn't being a vampire that made him this awful bastard. And so he said, when I'm going to do the second one, I want hyped up vampire action. He is a vampire, and it's all, we're going to make up for that. And he has. It is incredibly violent and bloody and wonderful and touching in an odd way at the same time. And that's the trick. The trick is that as you gain a sympathy or even an admiration in certain points, then Matt always goes, oh, by the way, this is an awful person, and he'll do something. And
that's, I'll say, I've been writing Grendel for 40 years, so
Yeah.
I have some experience at that. But the other example I would point to is The Sopranos.
Yeah.
I mean, how much did you love Tony? And then all of a sudden, like, nope, he's an asshole. Nope,
Yeah,
he's a monster.
Yeah.
Nope.
He had somebody killed or
Yeah.
And it could be anyone at any time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the first episode where him and Chris run that dude down, it's like you start off knowing that he is, and it's the same with this book. You start off knowing that the name the Impaler is not just a nickname for no reason.
Right, yeah.
Kelley, you gave a you gave a new meaning.
We just got a
from ass to mouth
endorsement plug from Mike Mignola. Yeah. And he was commenting like, thank God you guys actually showed Impalement for what it is,
Well, no one had done it. And that's one of the things that you realize no one had really done that.
No.
And Matt was right. And I had the virtue of knowing the whole story, obviously. So I went, it needs to start with something that is absolutely awful before he's anything supernatural.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously.
And everyone's seen Conan and he's chopping off heads and doing things. Okay. But this is cruel.
Yeah, you can't imagine having that done to you or seeing that done to somebody else.
No, but he also, as Matt does, obviously lives in a time where he says, impale those guys. He has dudes go, all right, we'll go do it. And it's like what we do, Yeah. And when I read about it, Matt does an enormous amount of research. So I felt I had to kind of keep up with the practical stuff. And when you read in some of the like, there were people who really knew how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was different for men or women for obvious reasons. And they knew how to do it to keep you alive as long as possible.
Yeah. And part of the impalement is not only the pain, but also the abject humiliation of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You're on display. It's the same with crucifixion. That's you're on display and your suffering is bared for all the world to see.
When the
it's a message to the enemies.
Master impalers, when they did it right, you died of thirst.
Jesus.
Yeah. You didn't die from the bleeding or it was died of thirst.
That's even worse.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
That's like crucifying somebody and saying they died of suffocation.
Yeah.
That's what you would die of with crucifixion because you couldn't draw yourself up to get a breath. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do want to ask about a couple of specific pieces in this first book. So this page really stuck out because me and my buddy who did a flip through of it. Did you draw it all as one or are these paste ups?
No, it's all one page.
Oh yeah, Kell doesn't do paste ups. Are you kidding?
No,
I don't know. Well, I was thinking that you drew each individual face and then made a collage.
No,
I drew. That's a real deal, man. He draws it all.
But I've always liked doing everything by hand, as much by hand in the traditional way, because I'm closer to it.
Yeah.
Okay, and things happen. Good. I mean, I'm not being artsy fartsy, but good mistakes will happen, and good things will happen. And I always start compositionally first, and then I'll do something. Sometimes I will go back and say, "Well, that's too easy to read. I want to slow them down a little bit."
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's wrong, and you're not supposed to do that, but I like that. I like slowing it down a bit, and to where someone says, "Wait a minute, I don't get this," and then when they see it, there's an impact. That's tricky.
Yeah.
But I like that because in horror, I don't want to use superhero tropes.
No, right. Doesn't make sense to.
No, and I want to take advantage of if Matt can go on a tangent, I want to do it.
Let's face it, there are so many artists in our industry that have those superhero tropes down cold. Kell is like the maestro when it comes to the horror motifs,
I wanted Matt.
He knows how to pull these off. If you look at that sequence with the witch, that could have just been really look at the framing of it and the point of views of the witch in various panels. Yeah, just magnificent.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. We'll get back to the interview in just a moment, but please hit that like button, drop a comment down below. The Kickstarter link is in the description, so go ahead and order your copy. I have a podcast called Direct Edition, and it is just a little extension of this channel, but more me and more things I want to talk about that may not be comic related, and also things that are comic related. But you know what? Let's hear from Kelley and Matt. Kelley, for my part, I always tell people, as much as I love like some of the classic Batman stuff, Long Halloween and stuff, the Red Rain, Crimson Mist, Bloodstorm trilogy is my favorite Batman story. I read it when I was a kid, and I reread it like every couple of years. I'm like, I know this is Elseworlds, but this is my favorite Batman.
Well, it's gothic in the sense that everybody dies, but the right things happen. And that's it. It's just everybody goes. There's no great moment where everything's fine. It's just bad. But the point being that since everyone dies, but at the end, Gotham's free of all there's no more Arkham Asylum dudes. Dracula's gone.
All gone.
Yeah.
But it was like, I think that was the first time I realized, like, oh, I want more horror comics, because it, truly is. Speaking of like just great pieces of this, Jose, what you guys are doing, and then what Jose's doing on top of it, this panel with the face is just,
isn't that great?
There again, we so as I said, we wanted to really capture the flavor of the comics from the 70s that we loved,
Mm-hmm.
And when we first brought Jose on board, I said to Jose, look, Jose, I got to admit, I've never really seen what I thought was a great color job on Kelley's work.
Right.
Because everybody goes, oh, I'm going to color him dark and moody because that's what the artwork is. And my opinion was always like, he already takes care of that part. You don't layer it on top. You're just going to clog it up. Right. I said, we need things to be bright and vibrant. And I pointed specifically to Dario Argento's Suspiria.
Right.
And Mario Bava's Black Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
It's an anthology, both of which are lit up like neon, pinball machines, and they're scary, and they have plenty of shadows and plenty of atmosphere within those neon colors, And he just took it and ran. And I don't know if you noticed, he filled in all the gutters with an off-white color, so it really does kind of evoke the feeling of aged paper from a comic in the 70s, And really makes the bright stuff pop.
And no one works like this
against bright white gutters. It would be diminished,
Yeah. And Matt really stressed that. He says, "Look, I want the blacks, the composition to really pop, and the best way to do it is to go the other direction." And I'm fine with that because I love Mario Bava and I love Dario Argento, so that I got it.
Here, and I'll tell a little story out of school. We had another colorist do some samples for us, and I had given the same instructions. They completely ignored what I said and gave me this dark mottled stuff, and I was just like, "No, I told you not to do that."
Yeah.
So that's when I said, "Wait a minute, who can give us what we want? Jose," because I had been watching the restoration work he was doing on the Rights and Swamp Thing archive stuff, and on the Richard Corbin library for Dark Horse, both of which vibrant stuff, and both of them known for their kind of horrific imagery. So,
my wife had it was odd he said that, because my wife had really just gotten into Richard Corbin's work and was really liking it. And it was this restored stuff by Jose. Yeah. And I had some of the original stuff, but that when it came out from Corbin, but I said, this guy gets it. And then Matt says, like 2 weeks later, how about José Villarrubia? And I went, yes, because my wife was like going, I don't know what this is, but I really like this guy's work. The guy's doing this. He seems to get it. And my wife knows nothing about comics. She was just reacting.
Yeah.
And, but she had really she got way into Corbin's work and how bright it was. And when Matt said it, I thought, well, then that's spooky.
And Villarrubia has been in the game for a while, right? Like three
that was the other thing. We knew, we're going to be working with a pro. There's not going to be any bullshit that he's going to drag into the project.
You don't have to say much to. I
was going to ask you that,
Jose.
Yeah, there are things here and there. I keep in this whole project. I keep calling myself the storytelling bitch.
Yeah,
because occasionally I'm oh no, wait, guys, like for instance, Jose in approaching it in an old school color fashion. Occasionally he'll throw in these bright yellows. I'm like, Jose, bright yellow equals sunshine. Can't do that. You know?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you're right. You know, and immediately, you know, but you know, I mean, similarly with, you know, even with Kelley, I'll say, like, for instance, the page 1 of book 1 there, we went through 4 different versions of that.
Yep.
We had one, I can't remember what that first one was. Do you remember? Oh, the big eyes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we just can't, you know, he would try another one and I'd be like, it's just not there, you know, and then finally hit that one. And we both knew immediately, boom, that's it. Because we wanted to say Dracula.
Yes, you have to do
without
that.
Without really being a portrait of Dracula's face, you know. No. We wanted to save.
Oh, are you talking about this page?
No. That's
the first one.
That's the signature tip pin. The one, the first page 1 there with the moon and the
yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's super effective. Yeah. Super effective.
But again, if I'm coming to Kelley with those kind of requests, it's always for storytelling reasons.
Yeah, that's
always, you know.
And you got and it again, it's the Kubrick thing. You either care or you don't. So you get it right. You've got to get it right.
Yep.
Another page that kind of blew my mind. It almost plays a trick with your eye is this page. Like what you were putting on the paper and what Jose was doing with the colors. It's it's amazing. And I implore you guys to think about when this is all done, an artist edition, because we all want to see what these.
There will be. We've already discussed it.
Yeah,
In all likelihood, there will be 2. So we will group books 1 and 2 into one artist edition. Books 3 and 4, because we don't want this giant thing you can.
It would be way too.
Well, it would be the Gutenberg Bible.
But that moment you're talking about there, you know, narratively, that's an important moment because, again, when you read the original novel, Dracula seems to be so much more powerful than any of the other vampires we see. Granted, we don't see all that many, and they are all women. All the other vampires we see are women.
Yeah.
But he can control the weather. He can command animals. He can do other things that you know. We see Lucy once she's transformed. We see she can turn into a mist and go through a crack into her tomb. But she doesn't seem as sharp as him. She seems kind of addled, you know. And so I was like, well, how and why is that the case? So it turns out, he's a based on this one little line, 2 little lines that Stoker said. He's also a trained necromancer. He's a sorcerer in addition to being a vampire.
Yeah, and
it just makes him all the more badass, you know. Well, at that moment where he's summoning the storms, and he's just doing it because he can, just just reveling in his power, you know.
Well, and I like that Matt also, you know, has him when he has to makes his own stakes. That's fun, and it's scary at the same time.
That was another turning point for me in writing the first book. Was like, oh, he has to impale a bunch of people again. You know? This book's called The Impaler. We need some impalement.
That was, I mean, the story
that would be his go-to, right? You know, I mean,
how else is he going to do it?
Cut their throats in the middle of the night? No.
If he was a wrestler, he has to have a signature move, and it's the impalement, you know?
It's a good move, too.
Yeah. It gets you every time.
Yeah, it does.
I really like that quiet scene out in the woods where he's cutting the stuff.
I did too. I have to say that
it's a very quiet, calm moment.
One of the creepiest moments in it is you know what he's thinking.
As I say, about halfway through the page, you're like, "Oh, he's carving giant steaks."
He's
right there.
This is what he's up to. He's got it planned.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a subtle moment that really.
And the truly magnificent 2-page spread with the dragon. That's what I was going to talk about next. Of the legend of the Scholomance is that down in the depths beneath the mountain slumbers this ancient dragon that will one day Satan's champion will ride it forth to seal Satan's dominion over the world at the end times. You know.
Yeah. Kelley, this is this 2-page spread is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, you talk about getting the page in that was like way better than you expected.
No, that was a bit because when you read it, you realize it's a big moment.
Yeah. Yes. And this thing is the size of like a battleship or bigger.
It's huge.
Yeah, if you look down the lower left-hand corner there, you can see Satan and Dracula's.
Yeah,
they're very tiny compared to him.
Yeah, and that it's sleeping on.
They're even in the foreground.
Yeah. And it's sleeping on a bunch of mini volcanoes.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's interesting because as I was reading it before I got to the panel or the text that said, I was like, oh, Ragnarok. And then it's there like, you know, 2 sentences later.
Yeah.
There again, something Kelley added. You mentioned there that he's sleeping on these, you know, little lava portals, you know.
Yeah.
I had cautioned him in the script that, okay, we have a giant sleeping dragon here. We can't evoke Smaug from the Lord of the Rings. So what's he do? Instead of putting him on a big pile of gold, he's sleeping on volcanoes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Brilliant.
Amazing.
It's brilliant. And then for fortunately, if you did get this, you do get a couple of the original pieces, the original pages in the back, but not to scale. But I did really appreciate you putting the Let the Right One in there because I know how much you love that movie.
That's my little Easter egg. Yep.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the Kickstarter here so people can see, because there's no other reason for me other than I absolutely want people to read this book. That's why I'm having you guys here to talk about it. So you've got the 3 covers again, which is
there are 2 covers, and then the white one there, which has metallic foil on the logo, is the limited signed and number edition. So that will come with a different tip-in sheet than the one you just showed there previously, but it'll have a tip-in sheet that's numbered and signed by both Kelley and I.
Right, and I back that again because I need to have uniformity in my in my books. So you get 3. I meant 3 options for covers.
Yep.
So you can get the first book digitally, and would that come right
you can
now?
still get if you look down there $45. Yeah, you can get the first book. No, go back up there. See right there in the middle. We still have some copies, some hardcover copies of the original.
Oh, there are.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So you can still get it. Actually,
and let me point out, the Kickstarter campaign is the only place to get the hardcovers.
Right.
Dark Horse Comics will be releasing a trade paperback version in just about 2 weeks, in fact, of book 1. Because we did definitely want to reach a larger audience. But
sure.
That will be a trade paperback. It's a very nice one, too. It has French flaps. You know what I mean?
Oh, nice.
That? Yeah. But the hardcovers, if you want to have hardcovers, if you're a hardcover guy, the Kickstarter is the only place to get those.
Yeah, and it feels good in hand. The paper's great. The hardcover.
We also, it's European album size. It's 8.5 by 11. We knew from the beginning we wanted to do that, again as an homage to heavy metal, but also just to give. I felt Kelley's art really needed. Every time I would look at Kelley's art in a standard American comic back format, I was like, he needs more space to breathe. You know, his stuff really needs to a broader canvas. You know.
Well, Kelley's. I mean, going back to the artist edition, the Kelley's Batman artist edition. Yeah, that thing's amazing. That thing is absolutely amazing.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. So these add-ons are great. You can get.
So this is a what you're looking at there. This is a 18 by 24 really high-end print, limited to 100 copies. It's gonna be printed on really, really gorgeous high-end offset printing, beautiful paper, signed and numbered by Kelley and I. And then we've got some merch.
Yeah, the new Orlok press hat. Let's take a look at those. Yeah,
and a bunch of really cool T-shirts too.
Yeah, I'm glad that you guys are wearing the hat because you just sold one to me, so I'll add that on. The shirts are great too. I mean, the Orlok press shirt's great. This one I mean, I love that.
Well, so pretty great. Yep.
So for anybody that's watching, obviously, if you've never watched one of my shows before, I'll say it again. You can find the links for the Kickstarter in the description below. Just click on it. It's right now what we're looking at these days, especially the last couple weeks. Some great stuff happening in the creator-owned space on these, crowdfunding. And you guys, obviously, I knew that was coming. Jim Mahfood just dropped the Savage Street Vigilante Kickstarter. Ed Pisker's family is putting out Switchblade Shorties on Zoop, and
good.
Yeah, and it's and I know people are like, oh well, it's a little more expensive than it would be. I'm like, but the whole point is like we have to have creators that keep creating, and the only way to do it is to pay them for their work.
Yeah, no, it's not more expensive than a brand new original graphic novel $45. That's kind of standard price.
No, and I just meant in general. Some people do complain about like, oh, it's a single issue. This, it's like, but you're getting a story. You're not getting, oh, come back next month and get the second part of the story and the fourth and fifth. You guys are putting out 4
And
books.
not only that, dude, how much does it cost to go to the theater these days to see a movie?
Yeah, don't even get me started.
Take your family of 4. You're already up to higher than the cost of our book,
Yeah,
shit.
Right? I mean, I went out and had a chicken sandwich and fries last night, and a drink. It cost me $25.
Yeah.
And that only lasts for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But I love this, and so I know you said definitely 4. Is there a possibility that it's going to be longer?
If inspiration strikes, yes. Because again, we are telling the untold tales. So if we get to the end of book 4 and I'm like, I definitely have an idea for book 5. I don't have that idea yet. But,
sure.
I'm a fluid and organic creator. So
no, that's great. I mean,
we do have in mind for another volume, and I can't really tell you what it is right now, but it'll be neat too. So
it will be neat. It will be very neat, and I think very appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is there anything else about this book that you wanted to mention, to sell it even further? I mean, you got me already. It's done, but we want to get people that maybe are.
Well, there again, I think we're just, we're bringing people a vision of Dracula, a character that they think they know so well. I keep maintaining Dracula is the most famous literary character of all time. All around the world, every area of the world. If you say the name Dracula, people kind of know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Not so Oliver Twist or D'Artagnan or, Holden Caulfield or any other literary character. But Dracula, from Sesame Street to Count Chocula, to how many movies, I think it's a tie between him and Sherlock Holmes as to who's been on screen more often.
Sure.
So it's a character that you really think and I think we're giving you stories that you didn't know.
Yeah.
It's lurid and poignant.
Yeah.
And the funny
Kelley always describes my scripts as being literary pulp.
Yes, it is.
I'll take that. I'll take that big cup of that. Believe me.
It's funny because we talked last time about Sherlock and Dracula, and I mentioned, if we're talking about all media, it's Batman. But without Dracula and without Sherlock, you don't get Batman anyway.
Batman is Dracula and Sherlock.
Yeah. So I do want to mention
the shadow. You got to acknowledge the shadow.
And the shadow.
Right. Yeah. Who knows what lurks in the hearts of men? I do want to mention your new website, Matt Wagner Comics.art, run by mutual friend Eli Schwab as part of that, right?
Eli's not really running it. He helped me set it up. But
He's helped me set it up. Okay.
He's so great. Eli with Ben Granoff co-hosts a Grendel podcast called The Devil in Detail.
Mm-hmm.
He helped me set it up. Very, very grateful to him for that. He's a swell guy.
Yeah, and shout out to Cosmic Lion, his comics publishing arm.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see him really taking off with that.
Yeah, me too. And Kelley, do you guys have any other things that are coming out that we should be looking for? Any Grendel or anything from Kelley?
I'm on Dracula.
Yeah,
he's on Dracula. I'm not drawing Dracula, so I have a little more time. I have a Grendel series that I'm working on now that's currently in publication, but it's a long series. It's a bunch of connected 4-issue series. So the issue 4 of that, it's called Devil's Crucible. First part's called Devil's Crucible Defiance. Next year we'll have part 2. The year after that we'll have part 3, and the year after that we'll have part 4. So it's a 16-chapter long story arc. There's a bunch of cool surprises in it. I'm writing and drawing that. My son Brennan is coloring it. I also did a quick little one-off story. My son's a big fan of Last Podcast on the Left, and the main guy on that, Marcus Parks, he and his wife do a side podcast called No Dogs in Space, which is a deep dive into all of my favorite bands. So, the New York Dolls, the Ramones, Patti Smith, the Replacements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I sent them a fan letter saying, I knew Marcus knew comics. I said, I don't know if you ever heard of me, but I've been in comics forever. And, this podcast you do is just the soundtrack of my entire career, And so Marcus came back to me, and they do a comic through Z2 Comics, right? Comic book on the left. And he said, would you be interested in drawing something that I would write. And I've almost never worked with other artists in my entire career, only a handful. And then he told me it was going to be a story about who killed Nancy Spungen, Sid Vicious's infamously murdered girlfriend. And
Very infamous.
Yeah, I think I would like to draw that. So that's going to come out early into 2025.
Okay, that's cool. And
It'll
then
be in, last comic book on the left, number 4.
Sweet. And for conventions, I know neither of you are doing New York, right? So I don't have to promote that.
No, I'm doing in next weekend. I'm in Cincinnati.
And then OAX 2025. Can we get Kelley there?
It looks like I probably will be going down to that again. Yeah.
And can we get this guy there?
Kelley, do you want to go down to Orlando in January?
Might be able to. Might.
Yeah,
we'll see how everything's going with this. Because to finish this one, Matt, I don't know how long the next one will be, but I'd like to make these. If there's a good thing with this book, is I like getting it down on time and delivered early.
We're not going to veer too much past 120 pages. I think that's our golden mean.
And this showed up early. I mean, you guys said last year that it was going to show up, and it showed up and ended up coming out or getting shipped like 3 or 4 weeks before you thought.
Yeah, you give yourself leeway.
We both really wanted to try this new model, the Kickstarter model, and both of us have seen too many of our colleagues get into just deep shit for not being able to get their project to fruition in time. We were just determined that wasn't going to happen with us.
No, it won't.
Our estimates of delivery were cautious.
Good.
And we were very happy when it did get to.
And we had to wait.
And we were very happy that it got into their hands before we launched the Kickstarter for book 2. So you really got to experience it and read it and absorb it. And hey, and here's the next one.
Yeah. You guys kicked ass on it. I mean, you've combined like what? 75 years of experience,
over 80 between the two.
Over 80. So, I think it's great. And I'm so excited for people to see this book. And the worst part is like waiting for the first one. I didn't have anything other than you guys talking about it to get me stoked on it. But now that I've read this, now I'm pissed I have to wait.
Yeah.
And it's still one decent sized graphic novel every year. That's a decent pace.
But it is tough. Look, it's tough for me because I'm about halfway through pencil and inking the second one, and it is better than the first one. I read it, I look at it, I go back, I go, well, I don't want to judge it by my own personal enthusiasm. I put it away for a while. I come back and I go, man, this is really working. This is really working.
I agree.
And I think it's because now we know who we're dealing with.
Sure.
And now we're seeing what that life is, and it's pure horror.
Yeah. I'm not blowing smoke when I tell people that this book is as good as I'm saying it is, and as everybody is saying it is.
It's this guy over here who
it's both of you guys.
Okay,
the visual medium.
It's Lennon and McCartney.
Yeah, there we go. I'll take that. So yes. Anybody who's watching this, Kickstarter links down below. This is going to drop probably 5 days or 6 days before it ends, so we get that final push. Yeah. I also.
Oh, that's the case. I will already be back from Cincinnati by then.
Oh, there you go. Oh, yeah. I forgot this. Right. But,
it doesn't matter the dates, I guess.
The good thing is if you're wondering, if am I going to like this first book, on the channel will be a full flip through with my buddy Daryl from Read Your Comics. He's got a great YouTube channel. We're putting it up on the channel. Kayfabe style flip through. I'm not as well. I don't have the knowledge that Jim and Ed, put down, but I do my best.
We'll make sure we get a link for that, and we will share it all over our pages. Yeah.
I will. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for your time. I wish you all the success. And by the time this airs, I'm expecting at least $500,000.
Okay, so do we.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching this awesome interview. Before you get going, don't forget to hit the like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe if you're not. I have more Horror Week videos coming to you after this, and please think about supporting the Kickstarter. I am telling you, this is one of the best books I've ever read, not just in the horror genre. And you can get your copy of the new one and maybe a copy of the old one if you haven't read it, and support two great creators on their fantastic endeavor. So please enjoy the rest of Horror Week. Have a happy Halloween, and don't forget
to drink more blood. Ah.